Welcome, friends. Here we are again for another episode of The Encouraging Word. This is Stephen Young at my side, and I am Paul Bennett. We're both on staff at Rocky River United Methodist, and if this is your first time tuning in, we're so glad you chose to do so. We got a lot of good conversation to get to, and so we're glad that we have you to include in that mix. Today, we are entering into a new topic. It's actually just going to be a one-off. And we have a new element to introduce actually later on in the podcast that we hope you enjoy. But let us, at this point, just get to it and help you connect with us if you're new. If you're new to the podcast, once again, we always open with a segment called our FIT segment, which means what, Stephen? Funny?
Something funny, interesting, and thought-provoking.
Yes. Or just one of those three is acceptable. Or if we're really desperate, we might stretch it, might not fit any of them directly. But it's something, ideally something personal, not too personal either, but something that Stephen and I can share from our own lives, our own stories, just to help you connect with us and stay up to speed with each other's lives and such. So do you want to kick us off, Stephen?
I'll start us off. Something that actually you introduced me to this. So something I've been listening to is a book called The Anxious Generation. So I've been listening to audiobooks, which is kind of a side note. It's kind of nice being like, it takes me like at least 20-25 minutes to get home, but that saves me like, I can listen to podcasts or books, and I listen to things sped up. So in a 30-minute time, I can almost get through an hour of a podcast. So which is great.
You sound like Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Right. Yeah, a little bit.
Chirping at you the whole
time. But you
time.
get used to it.
Yeah.
Anyways, I've been listening to the book Anxious Generation, and it's something that you recommended that you were reading through. And I'm like, that sounds interesting. And I think I've had heard of the book before, and the author had written another book, I think, called The Righteous Mind.
Yeah. That sounds right.
So, and I've heard of that book before, and that book was also well received. So I thought, let me just try it out. And ever since I started listening to it, I've been kind of hooked to it. And what it's about, Anxious Generation is a book about, which I'm sure some of you may have heard of it. It's kind of about our digital age, and specifically how generations have been affected by our digital age, and looking at primarily social media and phones. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably the main gist, is how social media and phones and that access to the internet, high-speed internet, has affected primarily kids' development, but also looking at a society as a whole as well.
Right.
So it kind of has a narrow and a little bit of a wider scope to it, but it's very well written. It's been very informative, and it's almost like I never expected a book like on this topic, and like kind of more like a research book, to be almost a page turner.
Right.
It's just like,
it grabs you.
Right, it like grabs you, and page turners are usually reserved for like fictional stories and stuff, but I'm like, this information is really great and really informative. So I've really enjoyed it, and I think also being a parent, and my girls right now don't have access to phones, and they do use tablets, but they haven't really accessed the internet, and like kind of like roamed on it. So it's like, I think it sets myself and Emily, my wife, it sets us up well for understanding like, how are we going to navigate when the girls get cell phones? How are we going to navigate social media? When are we going to allow them to have it? So it's good preparation for the future. So I've really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I feel like you're reading it at the perfect time. When your girls are not quite to that age, but getting closer, and you have just enough time with you and Emily to kind of develop a strategy and understanding of how you want to approach it. I wish that I'd have had the opportunity to read it 10-15 years ago when my wife and I were in that time period. But it really focuses on how there was a major shift around about the early 2010s. And a lot about the mental health implications of all of those technological advancements and social media and such to adolescents and preteens in particular. It's just it is just profound information and a page turner, because I think we can all relate to it, like especially if you have kids, in that age range, or work with kids, or you're looking back at your experience of your own kids when they were younger. But yeah, I highly recommend it as well. The Anxious Generation,
and it spans, like he even talks about the 80s and 90s too, and the effect that. So yeah, it's really good. So it's not just focused on just Gen Z or Gen Alpha or whatever Gen out there, but also looks backwards in 90s and 80s, and so yeah, it's a great book. Highly recommend it. So.
Yeah, and I would double down on that. So read it. Let us know what you think. So I guess today's all about kind of like media review day, because I was going to share about and kind of celebrate the recent high school musical, the Rocky River High School. Nice. I'm not, I'll admit I'm not somebody who gravitates frequently to like theater and plays and musicals and such, but I think they are growing on me, and I love any good story, any good performance of that nature. But the Rocky River High School this year did Matilda, and if you're not familiar with Matilda, it's a book that's written by Roald Dahl, and he's famous for other books that you probably know even better, such as Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach, which was my favorite book when I was a kid. And one of the themes in Roald Dahl's books is that the adults are often pretty cruel and really awful people, and the children are really oppressed and just suffering under the heavy thumb of these awful adults who are so selfish and inconsiderate. And Matilda is no different. But there's a lot of kind of dark humor and role reversal as far as heroes versus villains, and I just love his writing style, and more importantly, the theater department at Rocky River High School put on a fantastic performance, and I've felt this several times now watching plays and musicals there, that you just can't believe that you're watching 16 and 17-year-olds up there performing. They're just so gifted, and clearly work so hard to memorize the lines and get everything down, the dance moves and all of that. So unfortunately, all of this means nothing, because it was a three-day stretch that they put on the performance, and now it's over. But I highly recommend the book Matilda, and just want to give a shout out to the high school music and theater department. My daughter wasn't part of the cast, but she did a lot of the behind the scenes work with the costumes and such, and so proud of her for all that she put into that. So
well, that's great. I feel like seeing, I don't know, I'm not a huge musical guy either, but I mean there's a few. I really like Fiddler on the Roof.
Oh yeah, I love that. What's the main guy's name? The father. He's just who's always talking to God like he's just right up hovering above him in the air. Yeah.
I love the song "If I Were a Rich Man." Yep. It's a really fun song. I like that movie a lot. It makes me want to watch it right now.
It's fantastic.
That's probably my favorite musical. But yeah, I'm not I guess you can count, like, I really like Lion King and. Is that like a musical? Kind of is like
it is now. Yeah.
Blends in between like musical and animation. I guess it is technically a musical.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do find like appreciation for it, and I do think it obviously can tell really deep stories. And I didn't know Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was a book.
Yeah.
I think I might actually look into that, reading that, or at least listening to it, because I like the original movie with Gene Wilder.
Oh, me too, yeah. By far the better of the two.
It's kind of a nostalgic rush for me, because I remember watching it when I was young.
Yep.
And it was older then when I was young, so it's like
once again, his storytelling, it just, you think of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, some of the same type of like tone and mood within the, but it keeps you on edge, but it's just so creatively written and portrayed.
Yeah, it's good to hear. Well, what we're going to jump into now is that we're going to speak about kind of, or as Paul mentioned, like a one-off message here, that Easter is right around the corner, and it always comes quick. Every year it comes quick. So, but we wanted to give a message kind of like, obviously about Easter. And one thing that I've noticed, like being in the church and speaking to other people outside of the church and just speaking about my faith, is one thing that has always kind of like stuck out is that when people think of the resurrection, at least when it comes to heaven, so when it comes to heaven, people kind of don't understand, like, when it comes to understanding heaven, we always have this view of like this spiritual existence, this disembodied existence, and that we're kind of like floating in this other world in a sense. This, again, as I said, disembodied, like we don't really know what this strange place is. And but I think the Bible is very different in how it presents the resurrection. And really the Bible is very different too in how it presents I would say, in the sense of positivity towards creation. Now, obviously, there's a brokenness in sin, but the reason why Christ died and rose again was to eradicate sin, but not to get rid of the physical nature of the world.
Right.
Except some feel like we have a disconnect between the spiritual and the physical, but really the Bible wants those to be connected and united. Just like in the beginning in Genesis, it was a physical world that God created. So I say all that because today we want to talk about the importance of the fact that Jesus was physically rose from the dead, and the importance of what that means to us as Christian believers and the future of the new heavens and the earth to come. And what does that mean that Christ physically rose from the dead? What does that mean for us and the nature of his physical resurrection and how that applies to our faith? So I know we both kind of have different points we want to point out. And we're not going to go into tons and tons of detail, but I think we have enough points that we want to kind of help, again, like start your path and doing more research and reading the scriptures and having scripture references that you all, the listeners, can also delve into. This really, I think it's a fascinating, really fun exercise to do, exploring the physical nature of the resurrection. So if you want to start off with a couple of ones that you have when it comes to this topic.
Sure. I think for starters, like I've been wrestling with this in my own mind since we came up with the topic, and I think it helps to clarify, maybe make sure even you and I are on the same page. So the alternative to a physical resurrection is that his body would not have been resurrected, but we would have gotten the sense, just like our belief and trust in humans having a second life, a second existence, that we would have been granted evidence that Jesus was alive again in a spiritual sense, but the disciples and others, contemporaries of his, would not have seen him physically up walking around after. Is that kind of, just to make sure, like as folks are listening in, that the alternative to a physical resurrection was that, yes, Jesus is divine, he overcame death, but we didn't get to see him physically in his human shell again.
Yeah, and that's what I would say, or that he was resurrected, but only spiritually, in a sense that only his disciples would see him, something like that, in a sense that it's not, because the fact of the matter is, if Jesus Christ physically rose from the dead, whether you believed in Jesus or not, he's standing there before you. Where if you say like it was a spiritual resurrection that only his believers know about, then there's this sense of, did he really rise from the dead? There's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of criticism. And really it's really hard to place your faith in just this thing that hasn't really actually, you can't really prove it, where the physicalness of Jesus is something that can be proven, which again we'll get into those details, but I think you're right.
Well, then I think I'll just kind of pick up where you left off there, and just my first point, or the first reason for me in my mind that Jesus's resurrection had to be physical in nature was because it had to cancel out his physical death. If all of these witnesses are overseeing him on the cross and the life slowly draining out of him, and then complete evidence that he is a deceased physical body up there on the cross, and he's carried to the tomb and tucked away. I think in order for the resurrection to be complete and to accomplish what it's meant to accomplish, there has to be a physical resurrection to counteract that physical death. And so people need to see the physical Jesus, at least a physical Jesus in some bodily form, up walking around again. in order to solidify how monumental his resurrection really was, something that they had never seen before, a person raising themselves from the dead. Jesus had done it during his ministry for others, but this is somebody who, of his own power, his own volition, rose himself from the dead and is up walking around. People needed to see that.
Right. Yeah, and I agree. And then my second point, kind of going along with what you're saying, is that with Jesus' physical resurrection, it also is, and I'll jump to 1 John chapter 3, which speaks about that 1 John chapter 3 verses 1 and 2, specifically looking at verse 2, it says, "Dear friends, now we are children of God, and what we will be has not yet been made known, but we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like him." So I think that's huge, because it's saying, just as Christ appeared in his resurrection bodily, like physically there, 1 John say we will be like him. So for me, that's, John is saying that not only was he physically rose from the dead, but all those who place their faith and trust in him will also rise with him in his second coming and have, real physical bodies. And for me, that's an exciting, again, going back to what I said earlier, sometimes we have this disconnect between the spiritual and the physical, and the spiritual is always better and the physical is bad. But scripture again would say, no, Christ came to redeem the physical, and the physical is good and the spiritual is good, and combining those together. And I think that's an exciting prospect for a new heaven and new earth, to be physically present there, that I'm still going to walk and hold things and touch things and run around. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's a goodness to the physical nature, and actually both of us love nature, so
That's right.
To know that we're not just going to this spiritual existence, but a real physical world, redeemed and sin eradicated, but also the fullness of a physical creation without the chains of sin and the bounds of sin on ourselves and on creation as a whole. So.
Yeah, I think you even said it straight out of 1 John there, and it struck me for the first time as we're just honing in on this very narrow topic, that Jesus is going to appear again, and for someone to appear, there is a physical nature. You have to be able to visibly see it. So if the question is, does Jesus maintain his physical form, his physical body, even now into eternity? Clearly the answer is yes, or at the very least in his interactions with us and his returning to earth for us. He will be visible. He will be in a physical body that we can recognize. And I think just to emphasize what you just shared, that Jesus's victory over death was meant not just for himself, but for us. And so I think that's another reason that we needed to see a physical Jesus, or at least, his contemporaries needed to see it and then share that evidence with us, was that we know that gift is meant for us, just like Jesus coming and walking amongst us, and the fact that he had a physical birth, the fact that he physically interacted with his followers, his disciples. He hugged them, he laughed with them, he shook hands with them, he kissed, the kiss on the cheek thing that they did back in the day. All of these very physical bodily interactions and actions and events of Jesus' life were meant to demonstrate to us that in our physical form we can encounter and experience God, and that we are meant to mimic some of these things, such as birth and second birth, and the resurrection. We get to live on into eternity. So I think that's fantastic.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And I guess the last thing, and I don't know if you have more to add, but this is as good a time as any to throw it out there. Was it in 1 John that you just read, or maybe you just were speaking off the cuff, but you talked about the new heaven and the new earth? And this is something I'm not well versed in. I can't sit here and give you a some theological or fact based with scriptural citations about this, but everything that I've read and been taught over the years tells me that we are not going to leave the earth and ascend up into the clouds and spend eternity in some cloud realm, that we think of as heaven. It's that the earth is going to be renewed, and we're going to spend eternity in our physical selves, because those physical selves are good, and we were designed to experience others and God's creation and in a sense God through these physical bodies.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with that too. And when you look at Revelations, it's the new heaven, like it's the heavens and earth meeting together, and the new Jerusalem coming down from the sky, and it talks about God now being with His people. So there's physically, right?
Yeah.
And there's the real physical nature and this real coming down from heaven, and the joining of heaven and earth together again. And I completely agree with you. It's as I mentioned earlier, the restoration of all creation, which Paul mentions that in Romans, and how creation itself is groaning because of sin, and sin affects more than just us personally, but it affects scriptures. It affects the cosmos in some way, or at least Earth, and so understanding that Christ rose again physically. Also, when you read the scripture, when it says Jesus is the first fruits of new creation, that's what it means. Like He's the first evidence, or the first harvest, or the first first historical fact, almost like you can put a pin on and say, like, we know that new creation is coming because it has already come in Jesus. That's why Easter Sunday is such a celebratory time, because we know, and I say this to the youth a lot, like, there's not many faiths. I don't think there's any faiths that have such a concrete, historical, factual pinpoint where we can say, you know what, everything, like, I don't know what's going to happen in the world, but I do know for a fact that Jesus is alive, and the sense that He is alive means that there is a promise of a new heaven and new earth. So it's such a powerful thing to have, that sense of confidence that we have and assurance.
Easter is about not just what happened that day, but what is yet to come.
Right, what is yet to come.
And I love, I connecting dots that I've never connected before with Jesus being the first fruits of the new creation. That's exactly right. This is the new way, the new experience that humanity is intended for after sin is removed from the equation, or at least the consequences of it removed from the equation. And there were hints of it throughout history, throughout Scripture, like all of the high points of humanity's relationship with God were demonstrated through somehow, some way, God getting close to humanity, and even in a physical sense. Even if it wasn't a bodily God, it was humanity coming close to God in the form of a burning bush. It was humanity coming close to the form of God in a pillar of fire, or a cloud of smoke, or or a hand writing on a wall. There's so many different. And you got the Jacob's ladder, where there's God ascending or descending to us, and us ascending back there. So all of these, it's all about bringing God and humanity closer, and having this almost physical and sometimes literally physical interaction with each other, and that's those are illustrated as like the high points, what we're striving for, what we're hoping for. And so Jesus comes and establishes that as the new norm, the new reality is that God and humanity can be together. The temple of the curtain is torn in two, and it's all coming together.
And I'll end on this, just the last two things. One is, I don't think the church, the beginning in Acts, I don't think it would have had the conviction and the strength to testify and face all the persecution if Jesus had not physically rose from the dead. The fact that He did, and the fact that they touched Him and saw Him, gave them that confidence and conviction and strength, and obviously the Holy Spirit descending on Pentecost. But all of that, I think, was necessary for them for the mission of the church. And then the last thing I end to is on the personal. It's just kind of funny, like, you look at, I challenge all of us to read Luke 24 and to read John 20. So you have the story of Thomas, doubting Thomas, as people like to say, but Jesus, like, literally, like, touch me, see that I'm here. Like,
put your hands into my wounds.
I know.
It blows my mind.
Right, like, to be, that's crazy to think about. And then Luke 24 it's kind of a funny story, because he shows up and they think it's a ghost and they're afraid, and he's like, and again, even back then, people were like, they didn't understand, like, is he physically here? Because they even probably thought he was a spiritual, some sort of bodily and spiritual being. And he's like, no, I'm physical. Like, and he's like, hey, give me something to eat. And then he eats fish and bread right in front of them. You can just imagine, like, him showing them, like, hey, look at this fish, is great. Like, who cooked this? You know what I mean? Like, so it really, the Bible takes emphasis to say Jesus is physically alive. So I think that's just really important to point out. So we have one last segment that we're going to add here that we haven't done before here and on our podcast. So Paul, do you want to introduce us to our new last segment?
Yeah, I'm excited about this. So the idea with this segment is kind of to just go off the cuff and talk about something that is probably more often than not going to be like silly or ridiculous or very down to earth, very relaxed. So each recording, each time we come to you, we'll have probably a question of that nature that will just give us a chance to have a quick, goofy conversation about our response to that question. And we hope as you're listening in that you're answering the question for yourself. But the idea is to just some real life, maybe imaginary concept, but still something that is in the realm of real life, so that there's some meaning to it. But we may go super deep sometimes if prompted, or we may just be goofy surface level.
Some hypothetical questions.
There you go.
It's fun to make you think.
So what do we got for starters? We should start off strong here.
All right, here's our first question that for the segment is, it sounds so funny to read it. You find a button that lets you pause time, but only for 5 minutes a day. How do you use it? That's the question that we're going to end on, and kind of curious how would you answer that?
Well, so I know you're not the author of this question, but if you were, I would have questions because, and I can't help it. I hear a question like this, and I find it so fun and so intriguing to ponder that I go deeper than I probably should or than anybody else cares to go. But my first question would be, do I have any other special powers, or is this it? So. Because I want to know, do I know the future? Can I move faster than?
No, I was gonna say this is it.
This is it. Okay. Yeah. All right. I just want to make sure we understand the scope of our abilities here. All right. So you want me to throw something out there first?
Yeah. What's yours?
All right. So my first response to this is more of the in the kind of sincere and really well-meaning realm. And that is, I took it for a second to think about prevenient grace. And I think about how in our lives, and if you haven't taken our membership class or sat in on Stephen's confirmation class, you may not be familiar with the term, but prevenient grace in the Methodist world, because this is a concept that comes from John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church, is that God is working in our lives before we've come to recognize Him or commit our lives to Him, in order to show us His love and demonstrate Himself to us. So it could be something like as silly as a sunset. We see a sunset, and maybe we don't adhere to Christianity. We haven't accepted Christ into our hearts, but somehow that makes us feel deeper, think deeper, and wonder, where does that sunset come from? And our thoughts and our heart are more open to God because of it. Maybe it's watching a small child giggle. Maybe it's something that we witness. We witness an act of mercy or an act of goodwill. So prevenient grace, ways that God is at work in our lives. So if I have 5 minutes every day where everybody else is frozen in time, I'm looking for ways where I can partner with God to enact prevenient grace in people's lives. So if I know, for example, that my cousin Tom loves, chocolate cupcakes, time freezes, he's standing next to me, I'm going to go, down to the corner store, buy him a chocolate. I probably have to steal it though, because there's nobody.
I know it's 5 minutes.
How do I get a cupcake? So you got 5 minutes, and I bring him a cupcake and hand it to him, and then he would wake up and he'd be like, "Holy cow! Look, God gave me a cupcake." It would be because I was acting on God's behalf. But yeah, there are some issues there. Like you really have to plan and implement some of your things
Right.
before the 5 minutes starts.
Right. That's way deeper than I thought you would ever go.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
mine is completely opposite of being deep.
Uh-oh.
Because mine would be I'm not like embarrassed to share mine because
Probably should.
this is so kind and generous and so holy. Mine's actually literally it would save me like because I always think we were talking about this beforehand. So whenever you see those statistics and it has like they put your life up there and like this is how much time you spend watching TV or this is how much time you spend driving. And usually like this is how much time you spend in the bathroom and it's usually like a ton of time. So I thought, what if I could save 5 minutes in the bathroom? Then I could use that 5 minutes outside, you know, instead of like I don't have to miss the score, I don't have to miss the game, I don't have to miss time with my kids, I don't have to miss time with my wife who I love. I don't so
Well played.
and when I go in the bathroom, it's just 5 minutes pause, you know, and then I don't lose those 5 minutes and it's gonna add up over time. Like those extra 5 minutes. So
Wow, that's
yeah, mine's not as mine's not as great as prevenient grace and partnering with God. Mine's more like you know, saving time, relieving yourself, and
relieving it. Yes. So is there an assumption in this scenario that you get to choose which 5 minutes of the day?
Yeah,
or does it just happen?
no, you get to choose. It says it lets you
Oh.
pause time
there's
for
a
5
button.
minutes a day.
Yeah, there's a
the
button. Okay,
So,
so
the button,
I
would have it in the
wondering,
bathroom.
how do
Just-
you?
I would hit the button, go to the bathroom, and then hit it. And actually, if I go real fast, I can have expand it. Well, I guess you can't really expand it. Just
Hit the button real fast?
Yeah.
It gives you more time?
yeah.
I don't think that was in the description.
Maybe you don't have more time, but if say like you pause it and you go to the bathroom in like a minute, and then you unpause it.
Oh,
and
you
then
can hit the
can
button a second time
Yeah.
to pause
Yeah.
or to unpause and
pause
then,
and unpause. Yeah.
so you could kind of more strategically use your
Right.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
all right.
Yeah. I don't know. Mine's not as grand as yours, but
Well, no. Well, like I said, my first response is more of the on the up and up. More
cupcakes and
positive.
stuff,
Yeah, prevenient grace. I did have a couple other quick thoughts. One was you can't help yourself. Like if I got 5 minutes that I can mess with people
Yeah.
when they have no idea what I'm doing.
Right.
Like I'm gonna, move the keys to my wife's car.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
gosh, that would
you
be
like
awful.
find my friend. Like go get a squirrel that's
Yeah.
running through the front
Yeah,
yard.
yeah, there you
Pick
go.
it up and like put it on my friend's lap so
Right,
that
there
he
you
wakes
go,
up
yeah.
and he's gonna scroll. I would have to like totally
That's-
mess with and taunt people like
That's
that.
good. I do think it maybe in photography terms, I didn't like doing nature photography. If I find like a bird,
Mhm.
I'll pause it so then I can set myself up for the perfect
Ah,
shot.
You could get some
Yeah,
fantastic
that'd be
shots.
great.
Get like right up close to it.
Right,
Yeah.
they don't move for 5
Yeah.
minutes. That'd be great.
Well, here,
that's
one
probably better than the
last.
bathroom, I guess.
Yeah. Besides that, so this is something I was wrestling with, and this is my last thought on it. What would you feel? How would you feel about using that 5 minutes to be like Robin Hood-esque? So would you feel like there's an ethical dilemma there if you were to take that 5 minutes and be like, okay, I'm gonna find some people that have way too much and are greedy, and I'm gonna take some of their resources and their stuff, and I'm gonna reposition it into the possession of somebody who deserves a better lot
Yeah.
in life.
I don't know how you would do that because it's only 5. The thing is, what makes this question hard is because it's only 5 minutes. So what can you do in 5 minutes that's going to be that impactful?
Well,
That
you've
you
seen
could-
Robin Hood, like it took him 5 minutes in a Disney Robin Hood. Remember, he
Yeah,
puts that hole in the
yeah,
bottom of
that's
the
true,
carriage,
that's true.
drains out all the money.
Right.
There you got the money. You can go and put it wherever you want.
Right. I don't know if I could be a Robin Hood for 5 minutes.
I think
Right.
it sounds like, I mean, Robin Hood clearly is a heroic figure
Right,
without
yeah.
question, but it feels like it violates free will. Like I don't think that's how God operates. I think God wants us to choose to be generous.
Yeah.
But this is taking the question more seriously.
Right.
So, in a fantasy world, I would be Robin Hood for that 5 minutes. I would be doing stuff like
So let's dig in too deep with this question.
that. That's,
Yeah.
we're going to have to go deep to,
Right.
bring out the best in them.
Well, hopefully this is a fun segment for all you listening, and hopefully Actually, if you want to leave a comment what you would do in 5 minutes, pause
Yes,
for 5 minutes.
yeah, please do.
That would be fun to read. Yeah, so thank you all for listening. Thank you for spending time with us. Hopefully our discussion about the resurrection of Jesus can lead you on to further study, and just hopefully too with our fun questions and fit will just get you to know us better personally, and also think about your own life. What's God doing that's fun and interesting in my own life, and what are just questions that help me to think outside the box. So again, thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for listening to this podcast, and looking forward to Easter and at Rocky River, and hopefully we can see you at one of our 3 services, and we'll talk to you again soon.